Good evening. I'm Robert Schwartha, Director of Strategic Initiatives with the City of Mississauga and your facilitator for this evening's information session. Thank you for joining us this evening. Before moving forward, we would like to acknowledge that we today gather virtually on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Wendat, and Huron people. We also acknowledge that many First Nations, Inuit, Métis, and other global Indigenous people who call Mississauga home. We welcome everyone. I'd like to take a moment to review our agenda and walk through some of the logistics for tonight's session. We'll start the evening with remarks from Paul Mitchum, our City Manager and CAO, followed by a presentation on our election priorities from Mayor Bonnie Crombie. We'll then devote the rest of the time for a Q&A session so that our local federal candidates and residents have an opportunity to ask us questions. Thank you to the following candidates who have confirmed they will be joining us tonight. From Mississauga, Aaron Mills, Michael Bayer, People's Party, Ewan De Silva, Green Party, James Wynne, Conservative Party. From Mississauga Centre, Omar Algabra, Liberal Party, Ellie Diab, People's Party, Craig Laferriere, Green Party, Tanisha Samuel, NDP. From Mississauga Streetsville, Jasbeen Ratan, Conservative Party, Gurdeep Wallish, People's Party, and Natalie Spitziri, Animal Protection Party. From East Mississauga, East Cooksville, Peter Fonseca, Liberal Party, Dagmar Sullivan, Marxist-Leninist Party. From Mississauga Malton, Mark Davison, Green Party, Clyde Roach, Conservative Party. From Mississauga Lakeshore, Elizabeth Robertson, Green Party, and Vahid Safai, People's Party. Now on to logistics. Given that we are meeting virtually, the way you ask questions depends on how you join tonight's meeting. If you registered and are participating on WebEx, we encourage you to use the Q&A tool to type in a question at any time during the meeting. Your questions will not appear on the screen, but we will compile them as the session goes along. We will read out and answer as many as possible during the Q&A session. There will also be time for registered candidates who are joining us this evening to ask questions. Candidates may do so by raising your virtual hand during the Q&A session so that you can be placed into the queue to ask your question. I stress to the candidates that this is not a debate or a place for speeches. It's an information session and an opportunity for you to ask questions. I would ask you to keep your questions focused on our priority areas as a city and as succinct as possible. If you are watching the live stream, you can send your questions via email to mississauga@mississauga.ca. If you're joining by phone, you can send your questions by email or press *3 on your keypad to raise your hand. We will receive a notification and let you know when you may ask your question. We will do our very best to answer as many questions as possible this evening. However, we will be posting answers to the outstanding questions on Mississauga's Matters website following this event for those questions we have not had a chance to get to. Finally, please note that tonight's session is being recorded. The recording will be posted on our MississaugaMatters.ca website. Closed captioning has also been enabled for both the WebEx meeting and the live stream. I'd now like to ask Paul Mitchum, our City Manager and CAO, to say a few words. Paul?
My name is Paul Mitchum, and I am the City Manager and CAO here at the City of Mississauga. I'm pleased to be with you tonight as we outline our priorities as a city for the upcoming federal election and for the next federal government, whoever that might be. I'm joined this evening by our leadership team online, including Sherry Lichterman, Commissioner of Corporate Services and CFO, Andrew Whittemore, Commissioner of Planning and Building, Jeff Wright, Commissioner of Transportation and Works, and Jody Robelos, Acting Commissioner of Community Services. They will be happy to answer questions later in the session. As a city, I can tell you that our job is made easier when we have a committed federal partner who makes investments in our community. It's my job and that of my leadership team to implement the vision and goals of council and build out a great city, but we can't do it alone. Many signature pieces of community infrastructure are as a result of the partnership with and the investment by the federal and provincial governments like Celebration Square, the Mississauga Transitway, and newer projects like the Hurontario LRT. None of these would have been possible if the federal government had not been involved. It's my hope that no matter which party forms the next federal government, that they will continue to invest in cities and communities like ours. It's my pleasure to introduce Mayor Crombie. For years, many years, it's been the practice of the city to advocate for our priorities during federal and provincial elections. I'm pleased that Mayor Crombie and Council have embraced the Mississauga Matters campaign and have been champions, in advancing our priorities. It takes a team to realize our goals. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for being with us this evening, and I'm looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Paul. So welcome to the Mississauga Matters Candidate and Resident Information Session. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us. I'm pleased to be joined by members of council, including Chris Fonseca, Councillor for Ward 3, Matt Mahoney, Councillor for Ward 8, and Pat Sato, Councillor for Ward 9. And as Paul said, we're all joined by the city's leadership team who are well equipped to answer your questions. Tonight, we're going to talk about the City of Mississauga's priorities for the current federal election and what we expect from the next government and the local 6 federal MPs who will be elected. We have run Mississauga Matters campaigns in previous federal and provincial elections because we feel it is important that those who want to represent us in Ottawa know how important Mississauga's priorities are, because they are our residents' priorities too. At the local level, we are the closest to the people who live and work in our city. We are working to build a world-class city, but to do so requires a federal partner who will work with us and make important investments to build a great community we all want to call home. As you will hear me say throughout this presentation, city building is nation building. All parties must make the priorities of cities like Mississauga federal priorities too. For this campaign, our focus is on 4 main areas: addressing housing affordability, second, building local and rapid transit networks to break gridlock and congestion, third, investing in sustainable infrastructure and fostering a green recovery, and 4, supports for our businesses and the wider community, including our tourism, hospitality, and arts and culture sectors. So let's get started. I want to speak to you about what is fast becoming the most important issue to residents in Mississauga and in the wider GTA: housing affordability. Safe, affordable housing underpins our society and our economy. In the last year, the average price of home in Mississauga has increased to over $1 million. Home prices rose 16% between 2019 and 2020. The problem is that to be affordable, a home must be priced at approximately $420,000, or at a rental rate of $1,580 per month. This is affordable for people making between $58,000 and $108,000 a year in household income. Sadly, the math does not add up for many people, especially young people and families. Growth is creating greater demand for housing, but there is a lack of appropriate supply, and that is appropriate supply, because we do have a supply of housing, appropriate supply to meet this growth. And the rising cost of land and development is making it difficult to build homes at affordable price points. Home ownership is getting further and further out of reach. Too often, people are forced to move far away from their jobs in our city or live beyond their means to afford their home, and creating an inescapable debt cycle. This situation is getting out of hand, but we have been working closely to address it. In Mississauga, we have developed an affordable housing strategy called Making Room for the Middle. Our focus has been on the missing middle, those people I referenced who can afford a home priced at $420,000 and rent at $1,580 per month. Our plan contains 40 recommendations to build more housing that is affordable to middle-income earners in Mississauga, doing our part at the city to protect the existing supply of rental housing. And we're looking at ways to incentivize developers to build more affordable housing and rental units. But we have limited tools, and we do not have the fiscal firepower of the federal government. We have developed 6 recommendations that the federal government could implement to address the housing affordability crisis in Mississauga. And these include 1. Creating enduring and sustainable funding programs such as low-cost loans and grants. 2. Expanding affordable home ownership assistance to individuals such as shared equity mortgage programs. 3. Consider taxation policies that incent affordable housing, things like GST rebates, tax incentives for new or rehabilitated purpose-built rental housing. 4. Exploring tax credits and exemptions for affordable housing. This could look like, first, income tax credits for new second units, or land transfer tax exemptions, or finally, low-income housing credits, tax credits. Or fifthly, providing standardized local housing data and consistent methodologies to measure housing affordability. And finally, 6, expanding programs for housing developers to access financial backing or insurance to build more affordable housing, such as rental construction financing. I am pleased that housing affordability has become a big issue during this campaign. It needs to remain a big issue after the campaign as well. Making housing more affordable involves building local and rapid transit networks that connect people across Mississauga to the wider region and gives them an option other than the car. Mississauga is home to almost 800,000 people, 480,000 jobs, and 94,000 businesses. Our people, our workers, are increasingly spending more time in traffic and less time with their family and friends. In fact, residents rank traffic and congestion among their top issues facing our city. The pandemic only calmed traffic a little bit. If you've driven on our roads recently, you'll see that they are jam-packed yet again. We cannot build more roads, and even if we did, they would be filled quickly as well. To build 21st century cities means investing in transit. As you can see on this slide, Mississauga has a robust transit map that connects people north and south, as well as east and west. People are moving around the GTA as they need connected, seamless, rapid, and local transit to get where they need to go. Thanks to investments from the federal and provincial governments in recent years, Mississauga is moving ahead to realize this transit vision. But there are a few projects that remain unfunded. The federal government has to play a role in building transit in Mississauga. If you've ever taken the GO train on the Milton line, you know that it runs the wrong way. Mississauga is now a net importer of jobs. Gone are the days when Mississauga was a bedroom community to Toronto. We are now an economic powerhouse to our people, and those in neighboring cities need a way to get to work in Mississauga. The Milton line is the second busiest line in the GO Transit network, moving 7 million people per year by train and another 1.8 million by bus. There are over almost 8,000 businesses employing over 143,000 people in Mississauga alone. along this line. 1/3 of all employment in Mississauga is along the Milton line. But right now, the train only goes into Toronto in the morning and comes home from Toronto into Mississauga at night. And this simply does not make sense. We need investments in this corridor that will allow for all-day, two-way GO train service on the Milton line, just like we've seen on many other lines, including the Lakeshore West line. It's a game changer for our city. The federal and provincial governments need to work together to fund the GO expansion program on the Milton corridor and put all-day, two-way service in place as soon as possible. If you want to build more housing and create more jobs, investing in enhanced service on the Milton corridor is essential. Mississauga has been a leading voice on this issue for many years, going back as far as the early 1990s. But we need action now. While I'm thrilled that construction on the Hurontario LRT is now underway, major scope changes announced by the Ontario government in 2019 removed the downtown loop. For us, this is a key component of the line. Currently, thousands of jobs, businesses, and housing units are located along the Hurontario corridor, including Canada's largest development by Oxford Properties that will be built in Mississauga's downtown Square One district over the next 3 decades. Yes, over the next 30 years. Over 50 residential and commercial towers are planned for Mississauga's downtown core in the next 25 years. To realize the full potential of Mississauga's downtown and to complete our transit network, we need the downtown loop to be fully funded. We are calling on the federal candidates and parties to commit to funding this important piece of transit infrastructure so we can build a vibrant, livable, and walkable downtown core. In December 2017, the final station on the Mississauga Transitway was opened. In order to complete the project, a new transit terminal is needed in downtown Mississauga. This will create a central mobility hub by connecting MyWay and GO Transit buses, as well as the Hurontario LRT. The downtown section of the Transitway is the busiest, and buses are operating in mixed traffic. Building this terminal and connection will provide relief for both buses and unleashing the full potential of our downtown. Again, we need the federal government to be a partner on this project and support us with the funding that we need. The last transit project that I will speak about is the Dundas Bus Rapid Transit, or the BRT, along Dundas. The Dundas BRT is a part of a bold, forward-looking transportation plan. It will create stronger connections and provide fast, frequent, and reliable transit to those in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton region. It is planned to extend for 48 kilometers along Dundas Street from Highway 6 in Hamilton to the Kipling Transit Hub in Toronto, including approximately 17 kilometers in the city of Mississauga. The city's Dundas Connects project produced a master plan for the Dundas corridor, which makes recommendations on land use intensification and rapid transit for Dundas Street. Federal and provincial funding for this project through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, for which the city has applied, the ICIP, would ensure that rapid transit would be available to support the growth and redevelopment along Dundas. This project is supported by the community and the province. The next federal government needs to do the same. Along with seamless and connected transit, our quality of life relies on essential infrastructure, roads, bridges, transit, parks, trails, and community centers being in good condition. It's what makes our economy run, connects our communities, creates jobs, and makes Mississauga a destination for business and talent. The city of Mississauga currently owns approximately $13.5 billion worth of infrastructure, a staggering number. Every day, wear and tear is taking its toll on our infrastructure, as are the impacts of climate change, such as severe storms and flooding. That means we need more and more funding each year to keep our infrastructure in working order. This year alone, there is an almost $300 million gap between what the city can afford to build and maintain and what we need to build and maintain, while keeping property taxes competitive and at the rate of inflation. This gap exists because municipalities own 60% of the country's infrastructure, yet we only receive approximately 9 cents from every tax dollar collected in Canada. The math simply does not add up. 9 cents on every tax dollar simply isn't enough to fund a city's services or programs and maintain infrastructure costs like roads, bridges, and waterways in Canada's 6th largest city. As I said earlier, city building is nation building. If the federal government doesn't make significant investments in the infrastructure of our cities, it threatens our economic competitiveness as a nation and reduces the quality of life in our communities. We want a federal government committed to making long-term, predictable investments in critical municipal infrastructure, including a state of good repair. At the same time, climate change poses a very real threat to our cities and to the long-term sustainability of our infrastructure. Flooding, high winds, extended heat waves, and drought all put pressure on our infrastructure and our people. In Mississauga, we are preparing to adapt to and mitigate against climate change. But again, we cannot do it alone. The city is planning to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in climate-related infrastructure in the next 10 years. Our goal is an 80% reduction in GHG emissions by 2050, with a stretch goal of net zero. We've also taken action like implementing a stormwater charge, stormwater levy, if you will, a dedicated funding source used for long-term planning and new capital construction and improvement like replacing aging stormwater infrastructure. Managing the system lessens the risk of flooding, reduces creek erosion, and protects water quality. As you can see, we're taking some serious action to address climate change. But we need a federal government partner who will invest in cities to ensure that we are prepared to address climate change head on. This will be one of the greatest threats we've ever faced and will change how we do things. It will require all levels of government to work together. In previous years, this is where my presentation would have ended. But as we continue to battle COVID-19 and work to recover, there is another issue that needs to be addressed: support for small businesses and the community. We are home to over 94,000 businesses, with 97% of them being small businesses. During the pandemic, Mississauga's Main Street businesses experienced some of the most severe lockdowns in the country. Local arts and cultural events and venues are the soul of our city, and they help drive tourism from Ontario and beyond. The federal government must commit to an inclusive economic recovery for our local business, arts and culture, tourism, and aerospace sectors, including full participation in economic prosperity for women, racialized, and underrepresented communities. A strong, inclusive recovery includes continuing to deliver programs like the Canadian Emergency Rent Subsidy and the Canadian Wage Subsidy Program until the country and the economy are fully reopened for good. Supporting the tourism and arts and culture sectors, making them long-term priority with major investments into building new infrastructure, enhancement of arts and culture programming, offering visitor rebates, and retraining the workforce. making the aerospace sector a priority, and ensuring that we do not lose our domestic innovation and manufacturing base with its high-paying and highly skilled jobs to other countries. Working with the provinces, in particular Ontario, to properly fund a robust sick paid leave program that provides all workers with at least 10 paid sick days per year. When we work together, we will ensure that no one is left behind. There are many more issues that we could cover, but we do not have the time. As you mark your ballot, I hope you will think about what we have discussed tonight and vote for a candidate that will put Mississauga first and invest in our priorities. As Hazel would say, do your homework and read the platforms of each party. And most importantly, vote. No matter which party you end up supporting, please vote. Our democracy depends on you. Thank you. And now we are all of us, leadership team, myself, our city manager, are prepared to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Crombie. We would like to now open the floor to questions from our candidates and residents. As a reminder, you may ask a question using the Q&A tool on WebEx or by sending an email to mississaugamatters@mississauga.ca. And if you're joining by phone, you can send your questions by email, or you can press *3 on your keypad to raise your hand. We have received many questions and do hope to get to many of them as possible. If we do not get to your questions tonight, we will be posting a summary of the questions and themes of the answers on our mississaugamatters.ca website. We've invited the candidates, the registered candidates, to be panelists this evening, and I would ask them now to raise their hand, their virtual hand that is, if they have a question, and I will start to try to get to your questions as quickly as possible. So with that, I will turn it over to the candidates and see if any of them have a question. I'm looking at the screen now. Does anybody have a question they would like to ask? I will start with Elizabeth Robertson. You can unmute yourself and ask your question, Elizabeth.
Thank you again so much. I'm so appreciative. I do apologize for being a moment late. I wasn't sure if I heard the land acknowledgement at the beginning. My question is Mississauga receiving enough funds through the Green Municipal Funds? I believe that's processed by the Federation of Municipalities. I saw that last year there was some avenues where the funds were temporarily doubled, like the gas tax. So is Mississauga receiving enough just on green initiatives like you mentioned? Thank you.
Well, Elizabeth, thanks for the question. It's never enough, of course. But to get into the specifics, I'll ask our acting Commissioner, Jody Robles, to respond if possible. Jody?
Jody, you're still muted. There you go. You're good.
I had the I can't unmute myself button on. So thanks for raising that question, Elizabeth. And as the mayor said, it really is never enough. I think the challenge is a lot of programs are application based. And with that comes, a significant amount of pressure and a significant amount of oversubscription of these funds based on, other municipalities all wanting the same access. So we, in 2019, as I'm sure you know, we developed our first climate change action plan with some significant actions both internally for the city as well as the community. And with that, we are continuing to look for sustainable funding for our green infrastructure, both internally with our own city infrastructure, but also in the development of green building standards that we're looking to roll out within the next year or so. And it is a collective effort. It's not something that a municipality can do on its own. And climate change is really a lens that all of our projects need to go through. And we look at that with everything. The infrastructure piece is a huge gap for us. And then also increasing it to be resilient and climate efficient increases that gap. So I would definitely say no, the funding isn't enough. And in most cases, it's quite competitive in terms of getting that funding.
Thank you, Jody. I will now go to Ellie Diab and then James Wynn. Ellie, the floor is yours. Or is it Eli? I apologize if I said that incorrectly.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it's Eli. Thank you for giving me the floor. This is a question to Mayor Bonney. Mayor Bonney, since the lockdowns have proven to be an utter failure, both on the mental health and well-being of the Mississauga residents, on our small business owners, and on controlling the spread of a respiratory viral infection, can you commit in public today to no more lockdowns in the future? Thank you.
Thank you, Eli, for the question. You know what? We follow the advice of public health, and however we're directed by Dr. Lawrence Lowe, we follow his advice and direction. Of course, none of us want to see another lockdown. Certainly Mississauga, Peel Region, and the City of Toronto have been in lockdown longer than any other district in all of North America. However, we're also one of the most densely populated. We're home to most of the essential workers here. So to answer your question, we will continue to take the advice of public health and do what is right to protect the safety and well-being of our residents. Of course, I don't want to see another lockdown. None of us do. But if this variant, the Delta, or any of the new variants that may come into our community prove too severe, then more restrictive measures could be taken in the future.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll turn it over to James Wynn. James?
Good evening, councilors and city managers. I have a question for, I guess, the city staff and the mayor. Since the Ford administration came into power in 2018, and since the Trudeau government came into power in 2015, we're the 6th largest city nationally and the 3rd largest city provincially. What percentage of the infrastructure and transportation funding from the two respective governments have we gotten in proportion to our population size and rank size in the country? I've lived in Mississauga since 1990, and I agree with Madam Mayor, our infrastructure and transportation has been horrible. I lived in Erin Mills since 1990, and at that time, driving down Erin Mills Parkway was a breeze. Now it's like a parking lot. So I'd like to ask our councilors and our city managers, what is the percentage of the funding we've gotten, being that we're the 3rd largest in the province under the Ford administration and the 6th largest nationally under the Trudeau government since 15?
Thank you, James. Madam Mayor?
Yes, James. So this is a number we'll follow up with you on. Certainly, we've received almost $1 billion from the federal government. From the provincial government, I'm happy to say that we received full funding for the LRT, notwithstanding they removed the downtown loop from the project, which poses serious concerns for us, as I mentioned earlier. We have applied for many programs. Some of them have been funded. Some of them, unfortunately, have not, including the public marina and Port Credit. There have been quite a few that haven't been funded, but nonetheless, we apply wherever there is a funding program available. But with respect to the absolute percentages relative to other municipalities, we can't know that number, James, because we don't know what every municipality in Ontario has received federally and provincially. I will share with you that we apply for every program that is available and do our best, and have received a good share of the funding, particularly federally. And we continue to advocate to the provincial government for, long-term sustainable funding for municipalities so that we don't have to go cap in hand each time we want to build an aspirational project. Certainly there needs to be 21st century funding tools, revenue tools for cities. We're still relying on 19th century tools to build 21st century cities. So we're doing our best, but we still have to apply to other levels of government to fund those aspirational projects and infrastructure, transit, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll now turn it over to Tanisha Samuel.
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor, for the presentation. It's great to be in conversation with you once again today. I do have a question just with respect to public transportation. I have had the opportunity to see public transit evolve and grow in Mississauga over the past 30 years. So I can anticipate the growth that is expected as we are going to be getting quite a demand once we build more housing in the downtown core. And also my concerns really are about the connection between Mississauga and or Mississauga Transit and the TTC, and what the city has planned with respect to making frequency and the ease of access of getting to the TTC just better and faster. I myself rely on my way myself, and getting to Toronto on to the TTC is easily a 2-hour trip that I have to plan in advance. So just curious to know, in order to support this world-class growth, are we going to get a subway that runs to square one?
Tanisha, nice to chat with you again, and nice to hear from you. No, we can't afford a subway here. You need a lot of density to support a subway, and that's why we made the decision to go with an LRT north-south. And the reason that LRT runs north-south, because I know anecdotally people think they needed to collect to Toronto, but the bulk of the traffic runs north-south, not east-west. But we do connect. We connect at the Kipling subway with rapid bus transit express buses. We are asking for funding along Dundas for a bus rapid transit line. We hope that to get funded certainly as well. We'll be connecting to the crosstown in Toronto through our BRT, our transit way, which runs parallel to the 403. So we're always looking for better connections to the city of Toronto, but certainly we are building our LRT north-south. And so no, subway is not in our future. It is extremely expensive to run, and we just don't have the density to support it. And why don't I ask our Commissioner of Transit, Jeff Wright, who's also on the call, to talk about other ways of connecting to the city of Toronto or enhancing our public transit network. I think one of the best solutions, as I mentioned in my briefing, is the downtown loop, because there are over 55 towers being built in the downtown. And I know because you live in the downtown and you're running to represent the downtown. And unfortunately, that loop was cut out of the project, and it's vital to the residents of the downtown, and particularly with so many towers being built, but whether they're office, residential, etc. We have 25 towers in the next 5 years and another 35 towers in the 30 years in the future. Jeff, over to you about connections into Toronto and abroad. Thanks.
Crombie. So you've outlined a number of capital initiatives and projects that we're working on to provide better connections from MyWay's transit network, integrating with GO Transit, and then connecting with TTC as part of a seamless regional transit service. One element that I would add, Madam Mayor, to your question, Tanisha, is around work that we're doing right now around service and fare integration across the GTA, and particularly working with TTC on that issue. And so we're looking at, where we have overlapping service on some of our busy bus corridors, like Dundas, like Burnhamthorpe. And we're looking at service enhancements so we can reduce the amount of services that are running, but provide the same amount of efficiencies that are there. So we're working with TTC to develop a pilot around this on service integration, and more longer term bringing in fare integration. So you'd be familiar with the double fare issue that we have across 905 416 border with the TTC, where if you're taking a bus from Mississauga to get on the subway, you have to pay a double fare. And that makes it very difficult for people who are making that commute or commuting in from Toronto into Mississauga as well. But all that's going to take is funding. And so we can work on these plans But really what it comes down to is funding for transit. And what we're looking for and what we've been advocating for is a sustainable and dedicated funding for transit. You know, it's great to have capital funding for projects, but what we'd like to see is a dedicated funding to help us run transit, help us provide better service, help us make those connections that you've talked about that are so important to the transit ridership in Mississauga and to the people of the GTA.
Thank you, Jeff. We'll now go to Mark Davidson. Mark, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering how I unmuted. Okay, so one of the things I've been seeing across the GTA is that when a small, affordable home goes up for sale, young families will bid on it, and they will be outbid by developers. And the developer then spends between $600,000 and $900,000 on the house, tears it down, and then has to make up that close to $1 million in losses in the next home or homes that he or she builds. Now in Toronto, we have a legal mechanism to regulate that, which is not very effective. I'm wondering if A, that's a problem in Mississauga, and if it contributes to housing unaffordability, and B, whether you have an effective legal mechanism to regulate that. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. I think I'm going to ask Andrew Whittemore, who is our Commissioner of Planning and Building, to respond.
Good evening. Hi, thanks. I've not really noticed that we don't have good data that speaks to that as a problem. I mean, really, the main challenge in Mississauga right now is essentially the land is exceptionally costly in Mississauga, which is forcing housing to go up exponentially. In the rental market, the real issue is that we have an incredibly low vacancy rate. So a lot of the rents remain high. So what our whole strategy really is to A, retain the existing rental, but B, to really figure out a way to deliver rental housing as quickly and expeditiously as possible. One of those tools that we are working on is inclusionary zoning. But what the developers always tell us, and you will hear this time and time again, is that really to fix the housing problem, they need incentives. And the city alone cannot provide the incentives required for affordable housing. So we do look to our federal partners to really create programs and other things that would incentivize housing. I think that would be a big step forward in terms of solving the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. We're going to go to Vahid Saifai. Did I say that right, sir?
Thanks for having us here. I just want to touch quickly on transit. I know we moved on, but digging and subway is just way too expensive and too disruptive, so it's never going to be an option. Putting more buses on the road will just increase traffic. Has anyone ever considered a sky rail, either suspended or track? I mean, Mississauga is a world-class city. It's been growing the fastest in the last 20 years of any other city in the GTA. I mean, we're always more innovative than Toronto even. So this is something that I would propose. And I just want to also mention about housing. The municipalities have more control over the housing crisis than federal. One is because zoning laws and greenbelt laws, reforming those will give more access to people to build more economical housing. Thank you.
Yeah, so I can certainly respond to that, and I can ask Jeff Wright and Andrew also to respond on the housing and the transit. But so when we were building our LRT, Vahid, I will let you know that we analyzed all options at the time. And so certainly, you know, people like yourselves and Tanisha and others were very interested in residents and subways. So, you know, we wouldn't give up any lanes on our roadways. And what we discovered was if we were to build a subway, it would be 7 times the cost of building above ground on our LRT. And if we were to build a monorail, as you were suggesting, which is a great idea, and I know some cities do it, flyovers, and you've seen them even in New York City and other places, monorails are 4 times the cost. So we did what we could afford long term, and we built above ground on our LRT, and we think it was the most cost-effective, cost-efficient thing to do, not to run a huge amount of debt for the provincial government or the city, because of course we have to fund all the operational costs going forward. And I'll let Jeff to expand on that, and Andrew to respond to your housing issue question as well. Over to you, Jeff.
So Vahid, great question. And really what it comes down to is really an assessment of the benefits case of all the different transit technologies that are on the corridor. So Madam Mayor talked about the work that we did on here Ontario Street. And we recently wrapped up a project called Dundas Connects, which was kind of the same kind of project where we looked at land use and transportation options and really went into detail with our provincial partner Metrolinx on this project to really drive down on the benefits case for those different types of technologies. And what we're really looking to do is find that sweet spot where where the right amount of investment generates the maximum amount of returns, both in terms of ridership, environmental, and cost benefit, economic benefits for the city itself. And that's really how we select the appropriate type of transit technology that we're using. So in Mississauga, as example, you know, we're building light rail transit along here in Ontario with Metrolinx right now. We've built dedicated bus transit lanes through the transitway, and we're hoping to do the same thing for Dundas Street through Dundas Connects dedicated transit infrastructure, which will allow buses to run in their own right of way, providing a high frequency level of service. So it really comes down to that cost benefit assessment, and that's something that we take very seriously in terms of identifying the appropriate type of technology. And so I'll turn it over to Andrew now to build on the other parts of the question.
Thanks, Jeff. So an interesting question you raised with regard to zoning. So zoning, essentially, you're right. What that does is create the environment through which housing can be delivered. What developers often seek, however, is what the zoning much greater density than what the zoning allows for, which triggers a planning process. What we have tried to do in the past is to create a more predictable environment and an appropriate zone that would expedite housing so that they wouldn't have to go through a process. So that's some of the things that we're doing in the city of Mississauga. But again, a lot of the things, municipalities have a limited control. The developers also drive and control the market. So we have 20,000 units that have been approved and ready for building permits to be pulled, except developers are not developing those. So you have to ask yourself, why is that? Some of that is just control of the market, but some of that is they need to be incentivized in order to actually push that supply sometimes.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm going to go to Ewan De Silva, and then I'm going to go to Peter Fonseca afterwards.
Great, thank you very much. Messages for Mayor Crombie. It has to do with the plan for making room for the middle. I do like the idea and the concept. However, given that in Mississauga we can't build any more roads, do you have space allocated for these affordable rental units to be built? And if so, the number of $1,580 per month, is that something that we can realistically control if we build, for example, 1,000 units?
All very good points and very good questions. So out of our report, which we had a very large industry and government panel create, came out 40 recommendations, many of which touch on these projects, and we're happy to get all the candidates copies or the link to them, Making Room for the Middle report, and Andrew can speak on it more fully. Certainly, we're trying to incentivize the building of affordable housing. The city itself doesn't own any more land in which we're building housing, but we try to incentivize inclusionary zoning or proportional, which is really a proportion of each new development being zoned affordable. Certainly, we have plans at the region of Peel for more subsidized housing, and we've come into agreements with many of the developers of the large developments like Brightwater, for instance, which set aside an acre of land so that we can build affordable housing on their new project, in which the region of Peel will build and will create. So over to Andrew, if you want to supplement anything I didn't have to say, and perhaps if we can put the link to the Making Room for the Middle report into the chat function, if there is one here, or get it to all these candidates. That would be great. Andrew, over to you, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the only thing I was going to add, the Mayor's done an excellent job providing an overview, and I'm happy to speak to anybody more detail on the strategy. But with respect to planning in Mississauga, there is land, but our strategy of land is no longer greenfield development, it's infill development. So what you see happening in the city, and the mayor often speaks to this, is Mississauga, we are having to build up because there is no place to move out any longer. So a big part of our strategy is incentivizing. If you look to the waterfront as an example, Brightwater and Lakeview are two perfect examples of brownfield redevelopment. Again, these are expensive projects. They need federal funding for brownfield remediation and all those other things. So that helps for a city like Mississauga, where that is our only true land development opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And for all the candidates who would like to learn more and all the residents who would like to learn more about our affordable housing strategy, Making Room for the Middle, I encourage you to visit mississaugamatters.ca, where there's links to the document on that website. The last question that I see was Peter Fonseca with his hand up. So Peter, the floor is yours.
Rob, thank you very much. It's great to be here, Mayor Crombie and council and your leadership team. It's a terrific forum that gives us an opportunity to ask questions and also make comment. And, I have to say that really, our focus has always been on cities and really where the rubber meets the road. You know best, what's happening, to our citizens, what our citizens require to succeed. And that's why I'm very proud of everybody. First off, just through this pandemic, our vaccination rate and how we've done in terms of public health, and through supports from all levels of government. And then some of the initiatives that you spoke about, be it the affordable housing with our affordable housing strategy federally that we brought forward. It's a $40 billion strategy. I know housing comes through Peel Region when you're looking at kind of that affordable housing segment. And we've committed to partnering on the 10-year $1 billion plan with the region of Peel for affordable housing, and then looking at also that middle group in terms of being able to bring in that affordability so that they can afford a place, and then moving on to transit. We are very lucky actually right now that the Minister of Transportation in Mississauga is Omar Alghabra, and he is the member for Mississauga Centre, which as you were speaking to, having the transit hub down in the downtown, right by Square One, so important. I was at an announcement with Minister Alghabra about doing all-day two-way go on the Milton line. He committed $500 million to that project. I think that was terrific, and I can't agree with you more in terms of the LRT. And it's terrific that the province is funding the LRT. we have put forward as partners that we would be interested in the loop, in helping fund that loop around city center. It did not come to us from the province did not put that in kind of the suite of projects that it offered us federally, but we would like to revisit that. We would like to be able to bring that loop, because it's so vital to all of those residents that are living there now and those coming in. We see the, kind of the mega projects that are being built, and you talk about Oxford's 30-year plan. So I think that is so important. But what I really wanted to say is thank the city for, being so collaborative in terms of your needs, in terms of our needs, and that goes for beyond even the city, with the Mississauga Board of Trade helping our businesses to be able to succeed. But what I can say is that federally, decisions are best made when we hear from what the solution is from the ground level, and that is from cities. So we're happy to partner. We did it through the gas tax funding and the doubling of that, and to continue with sustainable funding for all these initiatives, be it affordable housing, looking at transit, and of course our business community, so that we can all succeed.
Thank you, Peter. Did you have a question, or?
Well, it was more of a comment, but I guess I go to the city in terms of moving that forward in terms of that loop. So the loop that we would like to see, and pushing that with the province, so the province does put that as one of its priorities, so that we then can get behind it and fund it, because we would like to partner on that loop and make it happen.
Thank you, Peter.
Peter, it's an excellent question and comment. So we haven't been able to get what the cost estimate of that loop would be. So we don't know how much to apply to you for. And of course, there would have to be an agreement with the provincial government, since the balance of the LRT is being funded by the provincial government. And sometimes it's a little bit awkward when we have two levels of government funding different portions of the same project. But nonetheless, that would be terrific. We would love to sit down and discuss that with you. And I know Minister Olgabra is actually on the call, and a number of the resident questions came in about transit and the Milton GO line, the all-day two-way service on the Milton GO line. And we won't have a time to get to them all, but let me just say that Minister Olgabra has approved that service both ways on the Milton GO line for enhanced service, and put forward about $500 million, and we're waiting for the provincial government to come to an agreement with the federal government to assist in the funding for the balance of that project. So we have our fingers crossed that this can happen and make a material, transformational change to our city. So we're very pleased. So I know there were a number of questions that also came into the residents. In retrospect, we should have booked this for another half an hour, but unfortunately, we're not able to do that tonight because of time commitments amongst everyone participating. But we really want to thank you all for participating. I'm delighted at the questions and comments from the candidates that have come forward. Thank you for being so engaged in the process and learning more about our priorities. Please do turn to the Mississauga Matters link so you can learn more about all of these issues. I've just provided you with the highlights. And to the residents who participated, we thank you for joining us. And my message to you is please vote. September 20th is a very important federal election, and we're not going to suggest to you who to vote for. We just ask you to please exercise your democratic right. It is so important, but please go out and vote on that day. So once again, thank you to all the prospective candidates for joining us, and to all the residents that listened in to the Mississauga Matters priorities. Mississauga does matter. We have 6 ridings. We are the road to forming the next government. So please, if you will, advocate for us strongly, and we will be happy to partner with you going forward. Thank you all for joining us this evening.
And thank you, Madam Mayor, for closing us out this evening. A recording of tonight's session will be posted on MississaugaMatters.ca. As well, you can find all of the background materials that form tonight's presentation, as well as links to other information that you might find interesting and necessary before you head to the ballot box. As well, if we didn't get to your question this evening, we have recorded them and we will be posting a summary of the answers to the questions or the themes of the questions that were asked to provide you with more information. And of course, if you have a detailed question, please email mississaugamatters@mississauga.ca and we will do our best to get you an answer as quickly as possible. Thank you to everybody for joining us this evening. Have a wonderful night. Thank you.